A very beautiful morning right here in Nairobi. Thank you so much for always keeping it TV47. It is the 22nd day of September 2020 and it's time for Morning Cafe, that daily show or morning show that ensures that your day kickstarts on a good note as you take a look at what is happening in the world of news, and importantly we get to expound some more on candid discussions that revolve around the same. My name is Linda Alela. Like I said, the program is Morning Cafe. Always a pleasure to be part of you as you join us. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela TV47KE. Ensure that you're part of me right from the start all the way to 9 a.m. We have so much lined up for you, and I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be worth a morning as we expound on what it means, this declaration or this advice that the CJ has given to President Uhuru Kenyatta. What way forward? Is it possible? If possible, then what does it mean for the people of Kenya? Even later, as we take a look at how best you can take care of your skin, daily skin routine. It's very important that you look good. Yesterday, we had a conversation on matters nutrition, on matters getting or keeping yourself healthy, exercise and all that. It's important for your skin. But importantly today, we just give you tips on the same later. That is on the lifestyle segment, and not forgetting the breakfast segment where we teach you some tips of making simple, quick breakfasts that are amazing. So welcome on board. Let's kickstart fast by taking a look at what it is that my team has prepared. And like I had mentioned earlier on, Chief Justice David Maraga has advised President Uhuru Kenyatta to dissolve the parliament, terming it unconstitutional for failing to pass the two-third gender rule. Maraga says he has received at least 6 petitions asking him to advise the president to dissolve the House. Mumbi Chege with the details.
Society of Kenya LSK seeking Chief Justice David Maraga to advise the President to dissolve the National Assembly. Maraga now says the National Assembly is operating contrary to the Constitution for failing to pass the two-third gender rule. The petition was tabled by Margaret Toili, Frederick Gishanga, Stephen Owoko, John Wangai, Aoko Bernard, David Sudi and the Law Society of Kenya LSK. The 6 citing failure to implement two-third gender rule contrary to Article 27 of the Constitution, even after an order from the High Court. Discrimination on the basis of one's gender, to correct historical injustices against minority groups, to ensure gender equality in leadership positions, failure to enact the law 5 years into the Constitution as stipulated in the Constitution, and failure to implement the two-third gender rule even after being given an additional year. Through a statement, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi has however come out to defend the House, saying Parliament should not be a punching bag when it comes to the issue of gender parity. It is the duty of the state to ensure the law is enacted and to ensure equality in elective positions. Muturi further says that there's a difference between Parliament and the state. There is no order in the Constitution directing Parliament to enact the two-third gender rule. He added that, owing to the cost implications of implementing the two-third gender rule through other mechanisms such as nomination and topping up, it is prudent if the matter were to be subjected to the people to propose ways of achieving two-third gender rule. End of quote. The debate now eliciting mixed reactions across the political divide. According to Chief Justice, the National Assembly was supposed to enact the two-third gender rule within the first 5 years after the promulgation of the current Constitution. Mumbi Chege, TV47.
That forms the basis of our discussion this morning. But that aside, the Teachers Service Commission has directed all teachers to report to school from Monday, the 28th of September. This, according to the Commission, is preparations for the eventual reopening of schools. Our Education Affairs reporter, Andren Kilemi, with the details.
Teachers across the country have been directed to report to their respective schools by 28th of September, which is Monday next week. According to TSC CEO Nancy Masharia, the Education Task Force resolved to have teachers back in schools to speed up the reopening of schools.
And we are therefore now asking our teachers to report back to schools on Monday, the 28th of September, to prepare for the eventual opening of schools.
Her sentiments are an indication that schools could reopen soon. Macharia assured the country that teachers would help learners recover lost time as well as save their academic year.
We wish to assure the country that our teachers are totally prepared and ready to support our children to recover the lost time and save the academic year that was at risk of being lost. We know our teachers will do this, and we ask all of you to support them.
On when schools will reopen, Education CS George Magoha said the committee will submit its report to a larger stakeholders meeting for endorsement.
In terms of the tertiary colleges, the mid-level and tertiary colleges, we are waiting the larger stakeholders, which will be any time between today and 28th, to concur with what we have decided. And we are going to encourage them to open with the ones which had examination classes first, and then they manage it from there.
The ministry further gave a go-ahead to final year students in universities taking courses that could require physical engagement to report back to school.
Parents and learners across the country will have to wait for the largest stakeholders meeting, which will be held on or before the 25th of this month to determine the exact dates for reopening. Andreen Kilemi, TV47, Nairobi.
Still on the same note, following the directive by the Ministry of Education asking teachers to report back to school next week in preparation for the reopening of schools, teachers and parents have expressed mixed reactions over the same. To some, readjusting their budgets for school fees is the biggest challenge since they were hoping schools would reopen in January. Mwangi Maina with that report.
Parents and teachers have been thrown into a state of confusion following a directive by the Ministry of Education for teachers to report back to school effective Monday, 28th September.
Hatutaki shule ifunguliwe alafu ugonjwa izidi kuenea. Tunataka tusubiri tuone hiyo ugonjwa pahali tafika. Lakini si kusema watoto warudi kwa shule na hawajui kujipanga.
Kama tuseme kama ni Januari tumejipanga. Sasa hii mwaka umeisha already. Imani mabakia miezi ngapi? Almost 2 months. Mwaka uishe. Kwa hivyo tuambie tujipange Januari.
A vast majority argue that schools should reopen January next year, since this year is as good as gone. Others decrying high cost of living and lack of school fees.
Watoto hawana viatu, hawana maguo, vitabu walipoteza. Tena karo ya kulipa hii shule tulikuwa tumefikiria sana na hii COVID-19. Pesa ya kurudisha hawa watoto shule hatuna. Tukionelea kwamba badala ya shule irudi wakati huu tugoje mpaka mwaka ingine Januari.
Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha has told parents whose children are in private schools and don't have fees will have no option but to take their children to public schools.
If you have no fee, come back to the public school. We shall take your child. It is free and compulsory.
Others are of the opinion that children would be able to maintain social distancing in schools and adhering to the ministry's directives to the latter. Hence, schools should reopen when the virus is contained fully.
Everywhere ukitembea, hata watu wazima social distance inawalemea. Sembuse watoto ndio wataweza kukipia social distance.
On the other hand, some parents want schools reopened immediately, arguing that life has to move on despite the pandemic.
Nimeacha mtoto wangu nyumbani, sijui anafanya nini. Siwezi afford kuandika yaya, at the same time kualisha. So it is good kama government itakubali watoto warejee shuleni, hata kama kutakuwa na mikakati, but watakuwa on the safe hands.
Ni sawa. Juu ya hawa, especially hawa candidates wa start date na form 4.
Ni vizuri watoto warudi shule haraka iwezekanavyo, sababu watoto wetu maisha yao iko katika hatari, na watoto ni wandogo, age yenye wako sahi wanashindwa kujicontrol.
For Tom Nyambeka, the head teacher at Al-Ansar School here in Nairobi, welcomed the ministry's directive. He says that all teachers will try their best to keep children safe at school.
Kwa hivyo mimi nikilinganisha sasa hivi hali ilivyo katika taifa la Kenya, watoto wengi wanazurura tu hapa nje. Kuliko jinsi ambavyo wangalikuwa wanakaa shuleni, wanadhibitiwa kidogo shuleni, kwa sababu watoto wakija, kwa mfano wanafunzi wa darasa la 8 ukiwaambia valia mask wanavaa, wanaelewa kidogo, wamekoma akili.
He says plans are already underway but will be heightened when teachers report on Monday to set the ball rolling.
Tayari tushanunua zile sanitizer kwa wingi, na vile vile tumenunua mitungi ya kuweka maji kwa umbali ili wanafunzi wapate kunawa mikono na kuweza kutumia zile sanitizers katika madarasa yao. Na vile vile nilivyotaja ni kwamba mikakati ya kuhakikisha kwamba darasa lina madawati machache ili kuweza kuzingatia sheria za Wizara ya Afya nchini.
Teacher Bernard Kimenya says not all teachers might report back to schools, as some have already been adversely affected by COVID-19. But all in all, the reopening of schools is good news to teachers, especially the private school teachers.
We are happy with the progress, and the majority of our teachers are very much up with the announcement that schools will be open next month. We have been idle for long, apart from Zoom teaching, and we had too many disadvantages when it comes to Zoom teaching, because you cannot measure the objectives of your lesson when you are teaching. There was no marking at all of all the books.
He says teachers will give their all to ensure the safety of children as they interact with each other.
For more than 6 months, this class has been empty and deserted after students and teachers were sent home following the outbreak of COVID-19. But now hopes are high that education is coming back on its knees amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and teachers and pupils will have another opportunity to meet again in class. Mwangi Maina, TV47.
Thanks, Mwangi. Now, staff at Kenyatta National Hospital have issued a 7-day strike notice after failure by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission (SRC) to implement a salary revision dated 13th September 2012. Led by the Secretary General of Kenya National Union of Nurses, Seth Panyako, they demanded a speedy implementation of SRC's approval letter before the end of the week. Lynette Gidua reports.
Unionizable staff at the Kenya National Hospital have today issued a 7-day strike notice after failure by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to implement a salary revision dated 13th September 2012. Led by the Secretary General of Kenya National Union of Nurses, Seth Panyako demanded the speed up of SRC's approval letter before the end of the week.
Say categorically that myself plus my colleagues, the trade union leadership for health workers in Kenyatta, together with the workers of Kenyatta National Hospital, have made a decision that they must fight for their rights. Yes. And the person or the organ within the government that thinks that is above Parliament. Parliament passed the budget and it became an act of Parliament, and this money was given to Kenyatta National Hospital. The only way for this act to be amended is SRC to go to Parliament and amend that act. But the money is here. The money must be given to the workers without any delay. So within 7 days, we want SRC to categorically write a letter withdrawing that love letter they had written before and allowing Kenyatta National Hospital Board to spend the money on payment of the salary for the workers for 7A.
Wake up every single day and find their way here, and who've been very instrumental during this time of COVID-19 in our country. But equally, they are also tired. They want remuneration as per the categorization. It is that simple. And we know that SRC is the body that is now coming in between the workers and the hospital. And if you remember 3 years ago, in 2017, we faced a similar situation with the doctors' collective bargaining agreement. Until today, that CBA is yet to be fully implemented.
Meanwhile, nurses in Embu have vowed to continue with their strike following the collapse of a meeting aimed at resolving the stalemate late last week.
Katika Embu County, kuna corruption ambayo inaendelea, na sisi kama wahudumu wa afya tunasema hatutakubali kuendelea kufanya kazi wakati pesa zetu hatujui mahali zinaenda. Tunasema tume ambayo inachunguza ufisadi iweze kukuja hapa katika gatuzi la Embu, iweze kukuja kufanya utafiti, waweze kukuja kufanya utafiti kamili.
Services have been disrupted in the county following the strike. Lynette Gidua, TV4.
Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has extended the existing containment measures rules for a further 2 days to the 29th of this month. The National Emergency Response and Coronavirus has convened a conference to review both the national and county COVID-19 response in consultation with all stakeholders on Monday next week. Nano Cloren with the details.
The National COVID-19 conference that will be presided over by President Kenyatta on Monday next week is expected to chart a responsible path forward for Kenya, establish the new normal for adaptation to living with COVID-19, outline a strategy for building and sustaining momentum with regard to recovery and resilience that will ensure Kenya bounces back better and stronger, showcase good practices which have strengthened economic resilience, including strengthening the capacity for local manufacturing and honoring persons who have emerged as COVID-19 heroes. This follows an extension of the containment measures guidelines by an extra 2 days until the 29th this month. The address by the head of state on the 28th next week will unveil the containment measures that will guide the country into the new normal as COVID-19 numbers continue to reduce. Nanok Lauren, TV 47.
Now, the government has formed a multi-agency team to resolve land disputes in Eastern Mau. The team has been directed to ensure that the matter is resolved within 11 days or weeks, as Willie Njiru reports from Naivasha.
For over 3 hours, the leaders were in a closed-door meeting, deliberating on protracted challenges on land allocation that has befell warring communities living in the east of Mau in Nakuru County.
We have agreed that we will try to accommodate everyone on that particular settlement, so that there is no one who's left out. Then now we'll work on the mechanics of allocating or settling everyone, while at the same time also addressing the special requirements that came as a result of the court order from the East African Court of Justice.
The Ogiek community had earlier on headed to the East Africa Court of Justice to seek redress over their settlement, and the court ordered the government to offer some land to them.
We will obey the order in the process as it is. So we will ensure that we set aside a property for the Ogiek as ordered by the court, and then at the same time work on resettling the others and ensuring that people have legit titles.
Na wakati process inapoendelea, pia jamii Ogiek wangejisikia kama Wakenya, kama hiyo sehemu wamesema kama serikali itatenga kama block moja ya Ogiek community, hili wakati huo mashamba ya madogo madogo yanapopeanwa title yake, pia jamii ya Ogiek wapate hiyo yao, na itakuwa ni furaha kwa sababu sisi kama jamii ya Ogiek ndio tulifanya hiyo sehemu ya Eastern Mau kuwa makazi.
After a series of consultative meetings of representatives from the communities with the president, he ordered that the 4CAS hold a meeting to have the matter resolved.
It's been a problem that has existed for over 2 decades. And from a security point of view, it has posed a very serious challenge to us. Because from time to time, you have skirmishes in the area, you have conflicts in the area.
Shida zetu enye imekuwa zeneo za Mariashoni na Neswet, leo hii imetatuliwa kwa uchumbe wa rais, ya kwamba kila mtu atakuwa settled pale kwa njia nzuri, kila mtu atakuwa na haki ya kuishi pale.
Following this move, the Interior CS has since instituted a task force that is going to camp at the east of Mau for 11 weeks to address the problem.
And they will work with the County Commissioner Nakuru and the Regional Commissioner Rift Valley to focus on that within the next 11 weeks to ensure that we have resolved the matter.
And with the high delegation meeting that was held here in Naivasha today has to bear any fruits sooner than later, then the 2 warring communities that have been on headlocks for over 2 decades will be a thing of the past. Reporting for TV 47 from Naivasha in Nakuru County, I'm Willie Dennis Njiru.
Now, Kenya is the country after Djibouti to accept the crew change challenge. The move is expected to create more opportunities for the youth under the blue economy. Today, yet another crew change is taking place at Liwatoni, Mombasa County. Mario Mocharo reports from Mombasa.
President Uhuru Kenyatta encouraged Kenyans to embrace the blue economy as a means to help fourth-form leavers and provide employment opportunities to the unemployed youth across the country. In a bid to protect inland citizens from the coronavirus pandemic, many seafarers were stuck at sea. However, the government says it's putting down proper COVID-19 protective measures to have the crew exchange so as to continue encouraging the growth of the economy.
We have our international crew, but we also have our Kenyan crew, and we want to deepen the skills of the Kenyan crew so that we can also reach the levels of being fishing master, of being chief engineer, of being first and second officers and first and second engineers, so that we can also have the capacity as a nation. Ndio hata sisi wenyewe tujitegemee, si ndio?
The event, which was attended by representatives from the Kenya Maritime Authority, Kenya Fisheries Service, Seafarers Union of Kenya, and the chair of the Blue Economy, saw different fishermen congratulated and others encouraged to foster good relations with partners from other countries so as to enhance cohesion, understanding, and fluent workmanship at sea.
We have proposed ratification of 3 conventions which will promote fishing activities in Kenya. Number 1, we've proposed the Cape Town Agreement, that is the 2012 agreement, and this is the similar as the SOLAS Convention. It will ensure that the vessel is safe for navigation. Number 2, we have proposed the STCW. It is called STCWF for fisherfolk. What it means that you will get a special training program and special standards for seafarers working on board fishing vessels, aside from the standard one for merchant ships. That one is called the STCWF. We have also proposed the ratification of ILO Fishing Convention, that is C-188.
The Kenyan-owned and flagged vessel Rahorakti will have, aside from foreign crewmen, 13 Kenyan seafarers working on contractual basis at sea. Reporting for TV47 from Mombasa County, I am Mariam Wacharo.
Thanks, Mariam. Now, to an interesting piece right here. I'm sure you have seen a video of Dennis Moody, who met President Uhuru Kenyatta, and out of excitement, Dennis cried. Here is the story of a 20-year-old young man who is ambitious of becoming a journalist.
I have a guest who is President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
It is the video of this young man full of excitement when he met the president that went viral. Dennis Moody got excited that he wasn't able to interview the president.
It's unbelievable. I can't even, it's unbelievable. Oh my God.
The video has elicited mixed reactions on social media. Moody says the president promised to help him and even promised him a meeting in State House.
Me personally, and also the TV station, like we get airwaves, we get equipments, because currently don't have equipments, so we are waiting for his call.
Dennis Moody says he was overwhelmed by the presence of the head of state and could not contain his emotions.
Kuna place nilikuwa na huyo mtu nilikuwa na interview, alikuwa anauza shells na anachora matatu. Akakuja hapa akataka kununua shell, but akaniona pale, akaona kijana mdogo pale. Akanuza, wewe na kuona na microphone, wewe si muuzaji, unafanya nini hapa? Kama nimetoka Kakamega, nimekuja ku interview small business people hapa.
The 20-year-old Moody had traveled from up country to interview small-scale traders for his show Hustle Mtaani.
Mimi hata sikuwa na anything to ask him because nilikuwa shocked ile yenye uko amazed, like yani kitu haijai happen. It's a 1 in a million chances. So hata sikuwa na swali ya kumuuliza.
Dennis, who is still in high school, wishes to pursue journalism as a career. For Dennis, it was a moment to shine. Whether he did, be the judge. Nancy Kimuyu, TV47.
Well, that's quite touching. Now, the Nairobi Meet of the World Athletics Continental Tour was officially launched Monday at the Athletics Kenya headquarters, Riadha House. The event, which is set to begin on October 3rd, has been dubbed the Kip Keino Classic in honor of athletics icon Kipchoge Keino. Our sports reporter Dennis Otieno attended the launch and now reports.
After the long wait, international athletics has finally graced the country.
Over 150 elite athletes are set to compete at the Nyayo National Stadium in what is Africa's biggest 2020 athletic event, the Nairobi Meet of the World Continental Tour. The event, that has been dubbed the Kip Keino Classic in honor of athletics legend Kipchoge Keino, was launched Monday at Riadha House and is scheduled to begin on 3rd October.
It is now my distinct honor and privilege to declare the Kip Keino Classic officially launched, and thank you very much.
The provisional list of athletes will be released on Tuesday, with Athletics Kenya President Jackson Tuwei revealing the selection criteria.
We have used the criteria of ranking because we could not do selection or competition or trials. So we have used a selection criteria where we look at the standings and the rankings within the world. We have also used the results of last year in the World Championships in Doha. We have also used the All African Games that took place in Rabat, Morocco last year. And we have also used, the last one that we used is our national championships that we held here in Nairobi.
An estimated 6,000 fans will be allowed into the stadium. Sports Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohamed calling on stakeholders to ensure the success of the event in line with the COVID-19 mitigation measures.
What we hope to have is 20% of the seating capacity. The seating capacity is 30,000. 20% should be about 6,000. Yeah? So that's what we intend to have. Because again, it's about social distancing, about making sure that everybody's safe, the fans are safe, the athletes are safe, and all of us are safe. Yeah.
Apart from urging the government to invest in infrastructure to tap the large talent pool, Kipchoge Keino, who graced the ceremony, also urged Kenyan athletes to refrain from doping.
We have talent in all sports, but what we need to put up infrastructure for them to be able to use such facilities. We need to have facilities of all kinds of sports in the country. And through the Ministry of Sports and Ministry of Education, if they sit down, we can be able to produce more and make this country, the name of this country, very high.
The World Continental Tour was originally scheduled to happen in 13 countries, but the trio of China, Jamaica and the Netherlands pulled out. Dennis Otieno, TV47 Sports.
And from that story, of course, by Dennis Otieno, it's now time that we take a short break. We'll be coming back with what's trending and, importantly, what is happening on the newspapers after this break. Welcome back to the broadcast. Time for the newspaper review. I have my hard copies right here and also soft copy on the screen. Joining me for the same is Collins Bore, who's going to help us expound on the newspapers. Good morning, Collins.
Good morning to you, Linda. Thanks for having me.
Collins, good morning.
Good morning, Linda.
You well?
I am.
All right, and it's now time that we take a look at the newspapers. I have the Daily Nation, the Standard newspaper, and the People's Daily. On the screen is the People's Daily, and to kickstart this is definitely the biggest story of the day, that advice or that bombshell that was dropped by CJ Maraga. Your Excellency, it is my constitutional duty, to advise you as the President of the Republic of Kenya, which I hereby do, to dissolve Parliament in accordance with Article 261(7) that declares that as CJ, as he asks head of state to send MPs and senators home for failing to enact the 2/3 gender rule. 4, 5, and 6 are the pages that expound this particular story on the People's Daily. And same story is captured on the front page of the Standard newspaper, and equally a story that has been captured on the Daily Nation. So I don't think we need to expound some more on this, because this is what we'll be discussing this morning. But then again, Collins, I'd welcome your take on the same.
Thank you very much. First, I want to believe that this is a debate that really started a long time ago. Mm-hmm. We have been talking about the gender principle for quite a long time, and our Parliament has failed to enact this particular, principle. And I think what the CJ did was simply follow what the Constitution says, because, as you rightly put, Article 261(7) of the Constitution requires that the CJ advises the President to dissolve Parliament in the event that it fails to enact that particular principle. And I think what CJ simply did was to do what Pontius Pilate did in the Bible, that is to wash his hands and say, I have done my bit, it's now the President to also do his bit. And we wait to see whether the President will heed to the advice by the CJ to dissolve Parliament. But I think it's time that now we, as the President, the executive needs to heed to some of these advice that is given by the CJ, because in the past we have seen the President really, disregarding the law. So we would want to see a different President this time round, and let us use this opportunity to fully implement the 2010 Constitution, failure to which we will not be doing ourselves any justice. So it's a matter of wait and see whether the President will dissolve or will, decide to do otherwise.
All right, and away from that, Matters Education, also captured on the front page of the People Daily, says no child will be sent home for fees. This is according to CS Magoha, and he says the teachers ordered to report to their schools by Monday. But Minister insists official reopening dates to be announced. This is a story that has been expounded on page 2 of the People Daily. And also, we have a story on Matters Education on the front page of the Standard newspaper, expounded on page 9. This is right here. First students report to school on October, like I said, October 5th. Back to school headache. Parents to dig deeper into their pockets to buy face masks for their children, on top of meeting usual cost of school fees, transport, books, uniform, when learning resumes a week after teachers report on September the 28th. Also on Matters School, on the front page of the Daily Nation. Let's try and get a hold of that. Is the front page of the Daily Nation. Also, one of the stories that has been expounded on page 6 of the same says, you can't raise fees, transfer child, Magoha tells parents. And I think parents are, scared of whether indeed they'd be able to have their students go to school because of the economic times, or tough economic times that we've witnessed. What do you make of this hullabaloo that revolves around whether schools should be reopened or not?
First, I want to say that I'm sure many teachers are ready to go back to teach, but the big problem and the big question that we should be asking ourselves, are the schools ready to host these students and teachers back? And that is the big question, because when the government asks teachers to go back to school on Monday to prepare schools for reopening, then you wonder who should be preparing schools for reopening. It is the government, because the role of teachers is simply to go there and teach. So the government must take this initiative and ensure that infrastructure in schools is availed, that there is enough room for social distancing, so that we don't have students crowding. And again, I have read the cabinet secretary talking of students having to transfer from private schools to public schools if the parents are unable to raise school fees. That again raises another concern. Now, already our public schools are overcrowded. We are now adding other students to these particular public schools. What are we doing to them? Are we simply killing our private institutions? Are we telling them that they should now shut and we all have our students in public schools? So it's going to be very tough, and I think the stakeholders are yet to decide on the opening day. They should listen to the voice of the parents. They should also listen to the voice of the Kenya Private Schools Association, so that they also give their input in as far as the reopening dates are concerned, because as you rightly put, these are also tough economic times to our parents and everybody else outside there. So as much as we are saying that that the secondary fee is catered for by government, we still have other expenses that come with the reopening of schools. That parents have to buy masks, parents have to buy stationery for their children, and all that will culminate into another economic crisis as far as the issue of purchasing all these things are concerned. So, in my view, I would, if I was asked my opinion, I would say that probably we'll use the remaining time between now and January to prepare schools, to help prepare parents, teachers, and also students psychologically, so that we can start the year 2021 fully, having known that we have had the 2020 just wasted like that, and we can start afresh. So that is what I would say as far as this is concerned.
All right, and still on the Daily Nation, that is on the front page, a story that has been captured: Uhuru likely to reopen economy on Monday, expounded on page 7 of the Daily Nation. And what are your expectations of the same upon that extension that is about 2 days, up to the 29th extension by President Uhuru Kenyatta on the restrictions that were put in regards to taming COVID-19? So Uhuru gives hint of reopening the country, as of course stakeholders set up meetings to deliberate on the same. The president will give new directions next Tuesday after forum on post-COVID future. What do you make of this, and what are your expectations?
Now, looking at the curve currently as it is, it's slowly flattening, and we are having very low number of cases reported daily, and it is almost obvious that the president is going to reopen the economy fully, that we are going to have those sectors that have been closed for quite a long time, maybe the bars and all that, being open. So that Kenyans can continue is another spike of these cases is concerned. So we would expect that the president would really have that particular stakeholders meeting that will incorporate all those who are concerned in the different sectors that we have in this country, and they will chart a way forward, because as you are aware, we have lost as a country a lot as far as our economy is concerned. So we are going to have an economic strategy laid down by the president together with other stakeholders that are involved, and the National Response Committee on Coronavirus will also be giving the updates on what they were able to do. And I'm sure very many questions will arise also in what they have been able to do. And if you read the report that was given by John Kinyua, you were also talking about honoring those people who have been at the forefront in as far as the fight against coronavirus is concerned. So we are likely to see that other people would also be awarded, so that they serve as a good example, having been ambassadors in the fight against coronavirus.
All right, that aside, to a report that is probably heartbreaking, but the truth of the matters, or the truth of the matter, front page of the Daily Nation, and expanded on the back page, mountain of debt, borrowing 2.6 billion a day. Kenya will hit ceiling by 2022. This is the story right here. Uhuru to leave 9 trillion debt. I think expounded on the last page, there will be a little borrowing space beyond 3 years, which implies that this will be the first crisis for the next president. And I think this is a story, or this is technically what we've been looking at and being worried about. In regards to the debt ceiling, the numerous monies that we've borrowed locally and also on international banks, and to even imagine that we still continue to borrow, and the fact that the economy is not performing so well, it's a clear indication that we are in trouble. And we have a member of parliament who's presenting a debt management bill, see to it, or act that is probably going to address how best and how much the country can be allowed to borrow. And before it gets to borrow, what needs to be incorporated in regards to the same. I do not know what you make of this, but Nambale Member of Parliament is the one who's fronted this particular bill, whether it's going to sail through and what it means when we are talking about a scenario where we're going to have 9 trillion debt by the time we are at 2022, 2023.
Yes, I think that is a conversation that needs to happen, because this is the government that has hugely borrowed. If you look at the borrowing that has happened since the Jubilee government took power, it's really saddening, and we have taken it to a new level. And much of this money that is borrowed is only used in recurrent expenditure. We haven't seen development as such, because, and again, there have been cases of corruption that are on the rise. So if we continue borrowing, then that money must be used in development so that we're able to repay it. But the moment money is borrowed and then it is squandered by the same people who borrow it, we will not be doing ourselves justice, but we will be overburdening the already burdened Kenyans. So it is time that Parliament, and I'm happy that the Nambale Member of Parliament is coming up with this particular bill that is able to seal the loopholes that are there in as far as the borrowing is concerned, because the government cannot continue over borrowing. We need to invest in what we have. Let us improve the capacity in our own economic activities that we have in the country, so that we avoid too much borrowing. Because look at just simply during this COVID-19 period, the money that has been borrowed, how are we going to repay that? And we are now talking about borrowing more in order to, quote unquote, have development in this country. So it is a debate that needs to happen, and I hope that the members of Parliament will rise to the occasion in the event and make sure that this bill that is being fronted by the Nambale Member of Parliament will sail through, because failure to that will be taking ourselves back, and it is the Kenyan people who will suffer, because we are the taxpayers and we have to pay this particular debt. So it is a conversation that needs to happen, and the president, the executive, then the parliament must be called to account, because they are the people who have the solution to all this.
As we await to see the same, let's cross back to the People Daily that we had not expounded more on. And aside from matters education and matters, of course, they stood that gender rule and that advisory or advice by the CJ to President Uhuru Kenyatta, we cross over to a different story altogether. Seems like this is making center stage in regards to different reactions and whether indeed members of parliament agree to that. Some of them saying that, you know what, enough is enough. It's not even a 2/3 deal now. It's a 50-50 affair. And numerous members of parliament or politicians coming to react on the same. But then we wait to see what will happen. And on matters held right here in the country, there's still a problem, even as we continue to deal with COVID-19. A story that has been expounded or captured on page 7 of the People Daily. Contract of security firm in Pumwani's camp suspended. And also we witnessed what happened over the weekend, speaking hugely about the health scenario. And amid this, even as, there would be that point of pointing fingers at the frontline workers or the health workers. The question then is just how much has been done towards meeting their needs, towards ensuring that the facilities are in the best of state. And we've seen medics are claiming, especially those ones in Nairobi, that they're going to join the rest of the country in going for a strike because the implementation that was set by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has not been met. This was set to be implemented sometimes in 2013, yes, but up until today, this has not been implemented. So they've given a 7 days notice that after this, if this is not going to be addressed, then they're going to run, or they're going to go for a strike, or they're going to down their tools. Just how much more should we be seeing, our medics do this, even as we talk of transforming the health sector?
Yes, first I want to say that what happened in Pumwani is something regrettable that shouldn't have happened to any mother out there. But again, it raises questions on the status of our, health facilities in this country. That our health workers, who are the front line workers in all these particular, even when we are talking of coronavirus, when we are talking of other issues, they are the largest stakeholders in as far as containing the diseases that we face as a country is concerned. So it is time that the government took them seriously. If they call for a strike, why hasn't the health ministry call them for a discussion and tell them that these are some of the proposals that we have, and that if we are not able to meet your demands at this particular time, we promise to do it by this other time. So our health workers have been ignored in this country, and their concerns are very genuine because they play a very critical role, and some of them have had to go an extra mile. But the government has failed to honor them, and it's time that they did that, because if they go on strike, you can imagine the kind of crisis that this country will be put in, because every now and then when you go to our health facilities, you'll always find patients crowded there. Even in our level 5 hospitals, level 4 hospitals, all these centers that we have that are funded by government, most of them will really every now and then have patients. So in the event that our health workers go on strike, what will happen to these patients? So it is time that the SRC also, did what they should do, and that is to increase the allowances that they had agreed, as you rightly put, in 2013. Up to now, it has not been implemented. So it is time that it is implemented so that we are able to have a workforce that is motivated to work, because without motivation, these health workers will not perform their duties well, because much is expected from them, but they are less motivated to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Also captured on page 11 in regards to the same, and these are editorial commentaries. Health sector is ailing because of corruption and greed. Personal responsibility is vital in curbing COVID-19, even as individuals have decided to go easy on the same. And also on another story that is also very important, Kenya, Horn of Africa, faces fresh locust invasion later in the year, and Kenya is amongst other East African countries facing another desert locust invasion later in the year. This is according to a projection by the United Nations, and it's a warning. Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN last week cautioned that the migratory pest could still attack the region despite the consistent war to contain them. And came COVID-19, and for a moment we forgot about the locust invasions in the country. But then again, the United Nations warns that we need to stay woke, because the likelihoods of them coming or resurfacing again are very high. What does it mean? And do you suppose then at this particular time we are well prepared amid these tough times of COVID-19, and also staring at a scenario whereby we need to ensure that at least our stores are full of foods because of the tough economic times?
Yeah, agriculture in this country is very important. It is the backbone of our economy, and therefore needs to be looked at critically. And I think that the agriculture ministry should take this particular matter seriously, that the warning has been given as early as now, that they should set aside money. And when we talk about setting aside money, it is money that will be used to combat the locust invasion. Because in this country, what we have always had is that money is set, and instead of going to do that which is intended to, is taken by a few individuals to their personal pockets, and it is very unfortunate. So the Ministry of Agriculture needs to start looking at ways in which they're able to combat this particular invasion in the event that it happens, now that it has gotten that warning as early as now. Because we cannot afford to wait for it to happen. Then we have the reactionary tactics that is synonymous with our politicians, that they will always come there after the locusts have invaded and farmers are suffering. And look at what happened when the locusts first invaded our crops in this country. The Ministry of Agriculture seemed to be confused. At one point, the minister is saying that these locusts, some of them are old, they are going to, in a few perish. But we saw that many people around the country suffered a lot. And it was because the government was not well prepared to deal with the problem. So I feel that acting as early as now and start trying to prevent, you prevent a problem before it happens already, now that you have been given advice on how to deal with it. So it's time that the ministry also looked at that. I know it's a tough time because we are we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I believe government has mechanisms and instruments that can help them be able to deal with some of these problems as they arise.
All right, and on that note, Collins, I think it's important that we take a short break. We'll be coming back with you as we take a look at the cartoon editions on the dailies and cross over to what's trending on Twitter as we expand some more on that conversation that we said earlier on. We'll be taking a look at this declaration or this advice by CJ Maraga, a constitutional move towards advising the president to dissolve the parliament. What way forward? Is it likely to happen? If it is going to happen, what will be the implications of the same? Of course, Collins will be joining us alongside Kamau Gatwechi. So keep it right here. We'll be right back after this short break. All right, and here we are. Gentlemen, you're on standby. Kamau Gatwechi and Collins Abore, political analysts and governance experts, join me this morning to expound some more on this declaration by CS Maraga. He reaches out for the hammer, barring a court order stopping President Uhuru Kenyatta from dissolving parliament for failing to enact a law on the 2/3 gender rule. As advised by Chief Justice David Maraga, Kenya is staring at a must by-election with monumental political and economic ramifications. And let's first of all take a look at what is on the cartoon edition of the Daily Nation. Yeah, I'm innocent in this 2/3 gender rule matter dissolve. This is, of course, he is CJ Maraga calling upon President Uhuru Kenyatta to do that, and Parliament right there burying their heads in the sand. I think this is what we'll be discussing this morning. Not I think, actually, I know this is what we'll be discussing this morning. It speaks volumes in regards to the same. And also, the same has been captured on the People Daily. And this is a little bit different, though. This is the cartoon edition on matters education. Close, open, close, open, close, open, schools reopening, the dates, a bit of confusion. So as you react to the cartoon editions of the day, gentlemen, it's important that I introduce you and say good morning.
Good morning.
You well?
Yeah, well.
All right, Kamau. All right, we're not able to get a hold of Kamau, but anyway, I'm back with you, Collins. The cartoon editions of the day, I think it's technically on what we have discussed. As you can see, Magoha right there, some bit of confusion, and Kifuli Koapo Chini with the key, whether to open or not, whether students should go back to school or not. And just how would you rate the performance of Magoha? Because, you know, very many people have looked at him as the biggest undoing at this point on matters education.
Thank you very much. To say the least, I think the performance has been very dismal. Really, we are really disappointed because every now and then there is this backfall on when schools should reopen or not. At one point, the CS says that schools will reopen in January. At some point, says that the schools will reopen in October. So there hasn't been a clear timelines on when schools should reopen. And when you look at the proposals that we now have, we expected that by yesterday, the CS would give us actual dates of reopening. But again, we are told that there is another stakeholders meeting that will happen, that this other stakeholder meeting will then advise the president on the appropriate date, and the president will then later on announce the actual date of reopening. So we are not sure when the schools are going to reopen. Even as at now, what we have in our newspaper are just proposals and recommendations, hearsay. We haven't heard from the horse's mouth. And that has been the greatest undoing of the good CS, of the good Professor Magoha, because he has failed to show leadership in as far as having actual dates of reopening are concerned. Because when you take us back and forth, even parents at home will be confused because they don't know when to prepare for this reopening. But I think the decision to have the teachers go back to school by next week could be the greatest indications that schools are going to reopen as early as October, so that we are able to pick up the syllabus coverage and all that. So really, from that cartoon, it's evident, because that is a discussion that has been happening in our social media. You even see people talking of the CS planning meetings to plan for other meetings instead of telling us what we should be doing in order to reopen the schools and go back to the normal learning.
And of course, speaking of which, or speaking of what is happening on the social media, still as we take a look at what has been discussed right here, and I think it's what is trending right now, innocent in this 2/3 gender rule matter. I think we've talked about that. As we await to see whether we can get a hold of Gatwechi, have we? Not just yet. Okay, well, let's take a look at what has been trending on Twitter before we come and start the discussion. Of course, CS Maraga has taken the better part of yesterday afternoon coming to this morning. One of the key things that is trending, and also, yes, schools reopening is trending. So let's first of all start with this one on schools reopening. A teacher complete the sequence. And I think it speaks of the confusion. I think you've seen this. more or less like a meme that has been very interesting. But you wrote, over 2.5, and everyone has been laughing about this. There's a lot of, speaking of what would treat students and teachers to so much confusion, because it's been a minute since, we all got to schools, or we had our students in school. So if schools resume now, oppression go day too much. I've not seen my friends in a long time. I'll be shy around them. Even my girlfriend itself, I'll have to toast her afresh. I'll be asking directions to my lodge. That's the kind of feeling that students are having right now, because it's been quite a long while. I thought school will not resume. Oh, all right. So they're writing, I thought school will not resume again. Oh, I've been already insulted all my teachers in group. And you have that's interesting. And I think this kind of reaction and feel that students could be having at this time, this one has been taking center stage for the longest of time in regards to the same. Everyone is excited about this. And when I realized school reopening is trending again with no actual reopening date, and this guy looks like they're a little bit confused, and the reaction is like, okay, so what next? As we all wait to see whether indeed schools will reopen again. And of course, this one it looks like it's the favorite of many. And that aside, that moment, the teacher tries to explain how to solve the assignment they gave, but actually ends up solving the whole thing on your note. As schools reopening at Niger_lost_boy, and lots of reaction in regards to the same. That is the biggest trend so far, coming to that one of Jayden. We all know what Jayden means, or who Jayden is. This is in regards to that advice by CJ Maraga. So people, honorable teachers, fellow students and adjudicators, in front of you is Jayden from Raka Primary School, ready to present to you a choral verse. Adjudicators that feel as a parent with no money to get Jayden back to school, I endorse this. Activist Okiya Omtata heads to court to challenge CS Magoha's plan to reopen schools, citing parents are strained and measures to tackle COVID-19 in schools are not up to standards. I don't know what you make of this, but yes, there are different reactions in regards to the same. We've carried stories that have expounded the feel of parents on ground and teachers only also. And the Grand Mullah speaks. The only issue I have with Grand Mullah is that he supports William Ruto well. Of course, this is according to a tweet. And also in regards to that directive by the CJ, Ahmed Nasir, if you think there is a genuine fight against corruption, you are delusional. And President Uhuru Kenyatta, my government is tackling the beast of corruption. That is according to, of course, what President Uhuru Kenyatta has been saying. And Ahmed Nasir, you think there's a genuine fight against, that's in regards to the same. But of course, aside from that, also CJ Maraga trending. Those are the key stories that are trending on Twitter right now. We'll be right here to ensure that we update you in the event that anything else happens. But let's now join the gentleman, and Kamau Gatwechi is already here with us. Reason why I was taking up on the Twitter trends is simply because this key story that we are expounding on has been trending on Twitter, and that bombshell by CJ Maraga. Kamau Gatwechi, first of all, did you expect this?
Yeah, good morning, Linda, and apologies for the technical failure occasioned by a power outage, but my 9-year-old daughter, Mwendo Mogore, is on top of it, making sure that we have power here. So, yeah, the bombshell, anybody would have expected it. I think by now Kenyans have actually realized that the Chief Justice has a penchant for trying to grab the headlines. This is an individual who actually has an insatiable urge for hitting the headlines. I mean, how else would you try to explain this? Why at this time when the gentleman has less than 200 days in the office? I mean, it just tells you that this is someone who just wants to make the headlines and leave. And, these have served him very well. He is the gentleman who nullified an election in Africa. And we thank God that everything was pacified and we had a repeat election. As to whether what he said was right or wrong, I would say, yes, it's okay. I mean, what he said is what is expected of us. We would wish to see the parliamentarians leave to the letter of the Constitution. But as to the timing around when he raises this, I mean, even if our law expert will tell us, but at times, for me, looking at it from Wanjiko's lens, I would say the timing is poor. I mean, we are faced with so many challenges. We have our COVID situation around us. who or how would we even envisage an election with all these challenges?
All right, you acknowledge very well that indeed he has less than 200 days in office. So that means he has the right or confidence, of course, to say that, he's looking probably to what it is that he's supposed to constitutionally execute before he exits office. And this is one of the key things. And he's within his jurisdiction as the CJ, as declared by the Constitution. Why is it then that other people would look at it as a malicious move, as the likes of Atwoli have said, that, him coming at this particular point speaks of, a point of where probably he could be malicious on his approach, looking at the altercations that they've been having with the executive, Collins?
Yes, as you're aware, there has been a fight between the executive and the judiciary in this country, and that is, I think, where the bone of contention is. But I want to believe that what is happening, as you rightly put, is in line with the Constitution, because what the CJ simply did is to invoke Article 261 of the Constitution, that gives him that leeway to advise the president in the event that Parliament fails to enact that particular legislation. And these are, and again, it is not time bound, because the president has all his time to do that thing. And I want to disagree with Kamau a little bit, because it doesn't mean that now that the CJ has given that particular advice that the president should act now. He can still postpone that to a later date and still act when he's still in office. So I don't think that it is going to affect anything. What the CJ was simply doing was playing his constitutional right, his constitutional, mandate, because that is what is constitutionally mandated to happen. Because history will judge him otherwise if he fails to do that. Look at the petitions that have been made to him. We are talking of 6 petitions, one of them by the LSK that, advises the CJ to tell the president to dissolve parliament so that we go to another election. So I think it is out of pressure outside there, because again, Parliament has failed to heed to 4 court orders that have been given for each to enact this particular legislation. So what else did the CJ have to do? The remaining bit was to invoke that particular article that, gives him that particular initiative to advise the president so that he can dissolve. And I think he was right in it, because that is what is expected of him.
Right, and Kamau Gatwechi, just picking it up from what Collins has mentioned, that, there are no specific timelines as to when the president should, proceed to do this. So someone says, tactfully, the president may decide to comply by that advisory just 3 months before August 2022. That means he shall have evaded it altogether, since the provisions of 101, Article 101(5) prohibits a filing or filling of such vacancies 3 months to the general elections. The other challenge with the president dissolving parliament would be that all the previous legislations and decisions passed by the same parliament prior to dissolution shall be considered unconstitutional. I mean, what do you make of this, and the fact that, yes, President Uhuru Kenyatta is now the determinant factor as to when or how this can be implemented?
Yeah, Linda, this does not squarely rest with the president. I can tell you for free, because even if the president was actually to invoke or maybe take up the advice positively from our Chief Justice, the flip side is this. It's not necessarily true that even if we went into an election tomorrow, that we are going to actually achieve the 2/3 or actually have 30% of the parliamentary seats go to women. I mean, the CJ should have gone beyond the interpretation of the law to actually even try to give advice to the president as to how the mechanism or the mechanics of putting together a situation whereby the 3% gender rule will actually be respected. But then just to throw a spanner at the president and say that this has to be done, yes, that is what the Constitution provides for. But then at the end of the day, I mean, this is a collective responsibility for all of us Kenyans. What is it that the electorate should actually do to ensure that we secure the 30% and actually run away from this nomination? You can imagine part of the biggest burden we have, even at these village kamkunjis, the parliament county assemblies. we actually forced to bring on board women so that we can be able to bridge that gap. I mean, this actually continues to push Kenyans to actually leak in terms of finances. So I would want somebody to actually give a balanced recommendation. This advisory should be taken positively. The timing, for me, I would say is poor. And whether or not there is a recommendation on how to do things right, then actually that fails. I'll give an example. The reading from the LSK, the chairman LSK, Nelson Havi, has actually said that the president has 21 days. I mean, you ask yourself, where did he get the number of days? I'm not a legal expert, but I don't see where the Constitution actually provides for the 21 days. And even then, I mean, how sure are we that we are going to raise the two-third majority, I mean, or the sharing of seats within Parliament? So these are some of the things that needs to be addressed, looked at in total sobriety before we can actually push this country to unnecessary tension.
And then my question then would be, what would have been the best timings? Or why is it that it looks like it's a battle or maybe it's an altercation, or I mean it's as a result of the altercation or the differences that we've seen between the judiciary and the executive? I want to ask this a polite question. What would have been the best time for CJ Maraga to bring this up before we come to Collins?
Yeah, I mean, the timing is only poor because you can appreciate, Linda, you've seen the hate and the political tension within the country. And, you know, bringing in at this time, nobody is actually ready for an election, not even IEBC, not even the politicians who've been running pretty, trying to confirm to us that they have the majority in this country. So, yes, it's a good thing. I mean, everybody should give it up to the CJ. I mean, getting the confidence and the courage to actually speak up and give his advisory as is required of him by the Constitution, then you must allow the CJ. But as to whether the timing is right or wrong, I mean, it's out there for all of us to see. The thing is, the CJ has been around. This should have been brought around. I mean, creatively so, trying to work very closely with the other arms of government to figure out how is it that we are able to address this constitutional impediment, something that has not been addressed. I mean, we are 8, 9, almost 10 years into the new constitution. And I mean, why is it that nothing has actually been done? So it's an issue of prioritization. And I mean, you can always read politics. And when you look at the legal opinions that have been thrown around by the political experts on Twitter and social media, it tells you that people don't look at this as it is. People only read politics in as far as the political position they actually occupy.
About reading this, then, Collins, let me come to you. And President Uhuru Kenyatta has failed to appoint the 41 judges, and of course, on the basis of their alleged unsustainability, and also that aspect of, questionable credibility and integrity. If you were to look at this, would you suppose then that it's a political move, that this move by the president not to appoint the 41 judges was informed by the altercation that again still exists between the judiciary and the executive? Then in this case, why point a finger at CJ and not point a finger at the president?
Yes, so I think the altercation that has existed between the executive and judiciary is what has really come out to play in all this particular matter. Because in the past, you realize that in very many cases, the president seems to have taken a different view of how things should be run, while the judiciary, on the other hand, has also done the same. Because if we are talking of the 41 judges that have not been appointed up to now, they have not been confirmed by the president, then, and the CJ is asking the president to do that, I think it is that particular fight that exists between the two that is now coming to play. And the CJ seems to have taken the bull by its horns and said that I'm going to do this and see what happens, because everybody else will know that the CJ was right in doing that, but then the ball will stop. The all responsibility will now be on the president to see whether he is able to follow the constitution, and then the CJ can now use that to say that the president has fully disregarded the constitution that he swore to protect. So there is that fight between the two, and if you look at it deeply, then you realize that probably it could be the fight that has existed between the two arms of government that has led to all this, because really this is an issue that should have been handled long time ago, because we are 10 years into the promulgation of the 2010 2010 Constitution. And the 2010 Constitution envisioned a scenario where some of these particular things could be passed even within 5 years. Now we are 10 years into this Constitution and no one. And this is an advice that was even given I think 4 years ago by the Attorney General then, that is Githu Muigai, who talked about a scenario where Parliament could be dissolved in the event that it does not enact the legislative piece. So it could be a fight between the executive and the judiciary, but again, there is a constitutional basis for that.
We are to overlook this tussle that is there between the two arms of government and take a look at, again, the issue at hand. Well, it's technically an issue that is being, of course, bringing or is being looked at as, as something that has been shortchanged by, the entire arm of government or the arms of government, because then this involves the presidency, of course, that is the executive. This involves the judiciary. This involves the legislature, which again is, squarely the body that has failed to pass the two-third gender rule. But then looking at what it is that has been mandated, the fifth schedule that guides the consequential legislation in Article 261 doesn't include Article 27 and 81 as part of the specified legislations to be enacted by Parliament within a specified period. I mean, in your own opinion, then, do you suppose that this is not just a constitutional principle that focuses on the legislature alone, but technically a state affair? What would you say about that? Gatwechi.
Yeah, technically, I think the drafters of the Constitution knew that this particular aspect would not necessarily be achieved. And that's why they did not give a legal time frame as to when this actually ought to have been enacted. I mean, all the other, if you look at the provisions around the formation of counties and the different aspects of leadership, especially on the devolution, there were clear timelines that were actually given. But then on this particular one, I think the drafters were actually, they're actually aware that it might not be easy to actually achieve the two-third gender rule. And that's how they left that. The only challenge here is, collectively, all Kenyans have actually failed. I again wish to resist the temptation of looking at this as being an altercation between the executive and the judiciary. The reason being, yes, you're open to read as much as you can on this, but then again, every other person is executing what is expected of them. What you would say is that the political class have actually failed Kenyans by not redeeming time. I mean, they've had enough time to have looked through most of the provisions given in our Constitution. And during the 10-year celebration, then, this would be one of the key achievements that would be celebrated at that day. You'd ask yourself a question, Linda. Have you seen enough agitation from the women parliamentarians in trying to actually fill this void, in trying to address this lacuna? I mean, as it is in the Constitution. You would forgive myself and others who have very limited knowledge in as far as law is concerned. But then these are our legislators. This is where they cook, they bake our Constitution and the rules that actually ultimately govern us. So you would have expected them to do much. But even now, looking at it, the female legislators have not done enough to actually make this a reality. So we must not necessarily point a finger at the CJ or now say that the president is the one who's supposed to drive the agenda to the next level. We must also look at it collectively and say we have failed as Kenyans. We didn't push enough for this. And now, I mean, time has come. The advisory has come out from the CJ. Now the onus rests with the president. Let's see how he plays ball. But you can almost tell the Speaker of the Assembly has already given has already raised a flag and said, even if you were to call an election tomorrow, the same situation will actually abound unless you have some serious mechanics in ensuring that we're going to have female legislators come into the House, almost unopposed, or maybe set aside or carve a rotational number of seats across the different counties so that you ensure that there will be the female parliamentarians or the ladies being represented in the House.
All right, and speaking of which, and some of the ladies have said that, we not even want the 2/3 gender rule. We actually wanted 50-50, a declaration that they say they're going to push through, of course, to see to it whether this can be implemented or incorporated on the BBI report. Some of them have already met the likes of Right Honorable Raila Odinga. And amongst the women leaders is Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru. I mean, when you look at this, and coming to you, Collins, do you suppose then that women in their own special way have sabotaged this move by the 2/3 gender rule? I mean, in how they have dealt with these issues, in how they have gone out there to lobby, in the reactions that they are presenting right now, some of them actually going against that advice by CJ Maraga to say that, of course, Parliament should be dissolved. Generally, looking at it, what has been the role of women towards this? Are they likely to achieve this at the end of the day?
It's really going to be tough. Let me be honest with you. Even getting to the, we are talking about the 2/3 gender rule, it's going to be tough. We cannot even start talking about the 50-50, principle right now. Let us first deal with what the Constitution says, so that if it is achieved, then we can now think of having the 50-50. But as at now, this constitution needs to be revisited, because if we really go with the nominations as they are in the both National Assembly and the Senate, then it means that we are going to increase the number of seats in our parliament, and that is going to be untenable for the Kenyan people, because we are going to pay more people simply because they have been nominated to fill those positions. Because you cannot force. Again, it rests, because there are those people who have taken the view that it rests with the sovereignty of the people of this country, that they are the people who elect their leaders, and they choose their leaders based on what they go outside there to say, to sell to them, their agenda. So therefore, if women will only be, talking about having positions given to them on the basis of nominations, then we will be failing this country, because we must encourage our political parties to also come up with mechanisms in which they are able to encourage women leaders to go for these positions. And I've always held the view that in this country, the women who have gone there to battle it out with men are the real women who should be honored. Because if we only sit pretty, because when you see most of these women speak, they only sit pretty and say that we need to have positions reserved for us. We are talking about women representatives. Then we need to have a discussion and look at what these women representatives have been able to achieve for the time that they have been there through their affirmative action. Less has been done. They are only there when there are issues that affect women. You see them demonstrating and saying that women need to be respected, women need to be given these positions. But as far as the elective positions are concerned, they have not taken the bull by its horn. So the women themselves also need to take this matter seriously and go to an election knowing that they also have a manifesto to sell without really looking at the gender and all that. And the electorate also need to be, educated, so that they're able to also have this particular, initiative, so that women can be elected to parliament and fulfill these positions without having to increase the number of the nomination slots.
All right. Once spoke to some very prominent person in the in Africa, in the continent, and his argument was that when you empower a woman, you empower the entire continent, and there was need for that push. We've seen different countries like, Rwanda doing great, South Africa itself incorporating women on leadership, well, whether by affirmative action or this other angle where, yes, they compete for elective positions. And a majority of them who've been, appointed have gone for the next round. They have battled it out alongside, of course, men and all that. So when you look at the legislatures, the female legislatures, when you look at the female leaders in the country, Gatwechi, do you suppose then that they have been the greatest undoing towards us attaining this? Have they not proved themselves enough? I mean, the women rep position has been a position that has been questioned. Many have asked, what is the point of us having this women rep position? I have had a conversation with, the Murang'a women representative, that is Sabina Chege, and she has expounded so much so what the role of a women rep are, and their roles. And honestly, if you'd listen to her and what it is that they do, you would genuinely be convinced that indeed it's a position that is worth keeping. Why is it that we are having a different tone, especially when it comes to our male counterparts?
I think, Linda, you're being very fair to the lady parliamentarians. I'll tell you this. that it's interesting to date, none of them has been able to cut an agenda for this country. You can see that they do not even have a presidential aspirant as we speak today. They've actually been busy following their male counterparts, and wherever they are taken, they actually fall into the ditch. Would have supposed that we see the ladies craft an agenda, a serious agenda that they could actually be able to sell to the Kenyan population. I can tell you this today, that the Kirinyaga governor has been going around saying or claiming that she would wish to see a 50-50%, a 50-50 power sharing.
Yeah.
And you know why she's saying that? Is so that they can actually get a chance to be a deputy president or a deputy prime minister. Why is it that we do not see the ladies go for the big seat?
It's a patriarchal society, Gatwechi. It is a patriarchal society, and we do not root out the fact that we've seen ladies, the same ladies that are there, the likes of course, Martha Karua, the likes of Charity Ngilu, have tried their level best to go out for the big seats. But being a patriarchal society, we've seen their efforts being, of course, curtailed, and not just curtailed, but equally the women themselves have not believed on these particular leaders. What makes you think that they still do not have the confidence to proceed and push for that?
But Linda, look at it. Some of the two communities that really would wish to push the ladies to the back burner, this would be the Gikuyu community. We saw them demystify that and elect a female governor. Look at the Kalenjin community. Madam, the late also was actually elected there. The Kambas have also been able to prove the same. So we can actually say this, that if the women of this country would rise above the pettiness of following the men and their selfish agendas, that they could actually craft. I mean, they have all what it takes. We have very polished and senior parliamentarians in today's parliament. We have very polished women in the Senate. Why is it that we do not see them try to craft an agenda for this country? I mean, this is their own undoing. It's nobody who's pushing them away from power. It's them that they are. I mean, why is it that even the person raising this issue is actually, if you look at the petition that was pushed to the courts, you'll see the former Sudi member of parliament, David Sudi. You don't see even ladies that case. I mean, why is that? There's a problem here.
All right. Well, for this to happen, honestly, there's need for a collective, responsibility. Hence the reason why this was presented to Parliament and this was supposed to be endorsed. And I remember President Uhuru Kenyatta, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, calling upon the legislatures to endorse this, to ensure that at least they pass the 2/3 gender rule. But there seems to be some, hypocrisy in how the male counterparts approach this. I do not know what you make of these callings, but I'd love to hear your take on the same. That much as women have not come out, or maybe they have not proved themselves out, do you suppose then that there's some curtailment that is probably stopping them or not allowing them the chance to fly? Affirmative action is being fought left, right, and center. I mean, just how best can the women stand out and prove that they are capable of this? Why is it that it has been reduced to a war between the male and the female?
It's really unfortunate that it has been reduced to a fight between the male and the female, and that should not have been the case in the first place, because we would want to see a society that is able to incorporate both the female gender and the male gender in positions of leadership. But again, it raises questions because, as you rightly put, we have had the former Prime Minister talk about this issue and support it. We have had the President himself talk about it. We have had the Deputy President support it. But when it comes to the enactment in the legislature, they have failed to do that. So there is some hypocrisy in that, since there is no good political will. We would expect that the President probably would call his troops to order and tell them that we now need to pass this legislation so that we are able to deal with this particular matter and once and for all. Because in the past, you have always seen how things are passed in the National Assembly and in the Senate, that they will call for a Kamkunji or they will call for a PG meeting, and the members of parliament will be whipped to follow a certain order. But the moment this does not happen, then it shows you that there is no goodwill from our politicians. And what they simply do is public relations. They go there and tell women that we are going to give you these positions. But when it comes to reality, they don't follow up to ensure that women get these particular positions. And again, the question should be, how much are our women leaders doing to ensure that they follow up on this? Many of them just complain outside there. But when you go go to Parliament, look at the records. Most of them will not raise on these particular issues and talk about them. They will only talk about them outside there during political rallies, during funerals, and they will call press conferences. But when it goes to, because Parliament is a house of records, you will go there and when you speak, it is recorded and you say you have made these proposals. Much of the proposals, if you look at them, for instance, are even from the male counterparts. Look at the two proposals that have failed to sail through in our National Assembly. They were proposed by Aden Duale. But did women take a part in trying to marshal support for it? No, they did not. And that is where we now fail to understand where this whole issue is coming from, that our women simply go outside and they start crying foul, but when it comes to the real ground where issues should be discussed, that is in the Parliament, they fail to rise to the occasion. So he's to blame.
All right, it's coming to Parliament, and Muturi has faulted the CJ for his advice, arguing that Parliament has been turned into a punching bag. Different reactions coming from all political quarters in regards to the same, and legal quarters, and people weighing in on the same. The likes of course, Senior Counsel James Orengo also weighing in on the same. He says CJ Maraga's advice to the president to dissolve Parliament is momentous, probably the most significant and historic from a constitutional standpoint. How we apply foundational principles and values of the rule of law and constitutionalism is now the biggest test. When you look at such, first of all, this declaration by Muturi, do you suppose then that in a way Parliament has become a punching bag? Is it that there's something that the Parliament is not doing right? I mean, oversight, legislation, representation. Are they doing it as would have been expected or as would have been envisioned in the Constitution?
Yes, indeed, and I would say rightfully so that our speaker has actually failed the Kenyan population. This gentleman draws a salary to actually make sure that the parliamentarians that we chose, actually legislate to even protect the Constitution, and he should have been more proactive in trying to ensure that the Constitution is actually respected through any legislation that requires to go through Parliament. Has he done that? The answer is no. And the question that begs then is why? Is it that they want these to remain as is? And if so, then it follows that there is no goodwill from the legislative wing of government. We would have expected that the speaker proactively advises the president and tries to marshal the numbers. You can see this. Look at it. When you look at the Tangatanga and the Kieleweke wing, I mean, these are two factions that can quickly come together and address this particular challenge. It is interesting to actually see that we have politicians reaching out to persons or people who do not even occupy any political seats within Parliament. You'd ask yourself, I mean, why is it that anybody in their rightful mind would imagine that our senior Mzee Atuoli would have any bearing in addressing what happens in Parliament? Yeah. I mean, it's laughable. You would have wished to see the women parliamentarians bring everybody together and try to push their own agenda, but that is not happening. So by extension, I would say, yes, the speaker has actually failed that, because we would have wished to see the speaker having proactively addressed this particular challenge.
All right, speaking of addressing the same and different reactions from different leaders, I'll be looking at them later on. But importantly, in the event that President Uhuru Kenyatta decides to go with a kind of advice, well, I don't know what you make of it. Are there likelihoods that he would do that? Then what next? What would this mean, Collins?
I think for the very first time, we have now dealt with the cliche that the law is clear. On this, the law is not clear, and I can tell you for sure, different lawyers have come, both lawyers and laymen have come with their own interpretation of the Constitution, and they are now talking about that the president. I heard the LSK president talk about 21 days. You would want to ask him where he came up with that particular timeline. You would want to see others talking about the president can wait up to 2022. The others that are saying that, the constitution does not envision another election apart from the general election that is held in August after every 5 years. So there is all those particular discussions that are going around, and for the very first time, the law is not clear, and this is where our lawyers now need to come out, because they have different interpretation. I was going through the tweets by the different lawyers yesterday, and it is really very interesting that you could see all of them taking a different view of this particular matter. But again, the simple thing that you would want to look at is that the law does not really say what happens when the president fails to adhere to the advice that is given by the Chief Justice. It does not. It leaves it's silent on that particular issue. And again, there are those who are now looking at the semantics and the meaning of words like shall and the meaning of word like advice. I'm sure when you are advised, it does not simply mean that you are going to follow it, right? So I think there is that semantics that we'll also be trying to look at. And there are those, I saw Ahmed Nasir say that any person who says that shall is means must happen, then probably is a first year student of law and does not have enough knowledge of the law. So there is a whole lot of interpretation of this, and it is only a wait and see. But I'm trying to imagine that the AG, that is the Attorney General, will soon issue a statement also, trying to come up with his own interpretation of the same. So it is going to be a back and forth thing that may not, at the end of the day, find a conclusive nature, that we are going still to continue with what has been happening, because it's not the first time that is happening. Remember, there was an advisory that the cabinet was not well constituted. If the president acts, so your guess is as good as mine as far as this one is concerned.
And of course, as many would argue, we are staring at an impending constitutional crisis. And just picking up reactions of different leaders, Speaker Muturi, it is the state that is empowered to ensure 2/3 of members of elective and appointive positions are not of the same gender. And Zamba Gitonga says the decision to resolve parliament is mandatory. Article 261 is clear that he has no option. That should be the president. And Ken Lusaka says we have resolved to have a Kamkunji with senators. The reaction will inform our collective response. James Orengo, I think I've touched on that already. And lastly, Abdikadir Mohammed says the law said that the implementation of the gender rule should be, but male chauvinism stood on its way in parliament. In regards to the same, and the effect of devolution automatically means then that the parliament will, dissolution of parliament contemplated is that, of course, 261(7) will be prematurely cut off or short term of parliament, and thereby precipitate a general election. At least that one is clear within the constitution, aside from all these other ones that we're trying to seek interpretation. Gatwechi, in the event that the president decides to surprise us and go by that advice, what would that mean?
I mean, Linda, I don't think the president, even without Attorney General's advice, would actually even contemplate having an election on this time. The reason being that we already have a huge gap even in our current budget. I mean, we don't even know how we're going to plug that hole. You can imagine that the revenue collection by KRA is way below the expectation. Where would we raise the money to even do this? Just the other day, Chebukati mentioned to us that they do not even envisage a situation where they could buy new equipments for an election and they could only reuse the old ones. So in a situation where a country is not even able to feed its own, how then would you even have this imagination of an election? I mean, the president is actually only focused at his big four and leaving a legacy for this country. So trying to interfere with his calendar and diary of activities won't fly. I think the president will certainly pay some blind eye to that love letter in quotes from the CJ and actually continue doing what he must do.
If you're talking about interfering with the calendar, Gatwechi, talking about interfering with the calendar, the president endorses the BBI, which is likely to take us for a referendum. I mean, don't you think that equally the same would interfere his calendar of operation?
Linda, you'll appreciate that the PI election is a yes or no. I mean, this is a very easy situation
Is
for
it
a country.
so?
It's a yes or no.
Okay.
This other one, Linda, the biggest problem with this other one is that a repeat election does not necessarily say that you're gonna achieve the 2/3 gender rule.
Yes.
If it was, then everybody should be pushing the president to do that.
Right.
So what we would say is that the president should quickly engage Senate and Parliament to put their heads together, then instruct Parliament to see how they can put in the mechanics to ensure the 2/3 majority. Gender rule will always be respected. That is the best he can do.
I mean, how many times has this been debated in the House? What are the likelihoods that the Senate, what are the likelihoods that the members of Parliament are going to, deliberate otherwise on this, or contrary to what they have deliberated prior, Collins?
I think it's very hard because, again, there are those who will want to look at this as an illegitimate parliament, so to speak, right now. So how is the legitimate parliament going to pass some of these laws? But I want to agree with what Kamau has said in as far as the IBC is concerned. Look at it right now. It is not even properly constituted to do an election.
Yeah.
We deliberately so, or I don't know how, but they have failed to have those particular commissioners fill those positions so that an election can even be conducted. Let alone the event of having another general election. Even the BBI itself is going to be very difficult if the IBC is not going to be properly constituted. So I think it's really going to be a very hard thing for the president to do, because he's staring at a constitutional crisis. We don't know where as a country we are headed to. Are we going to shelve the BBI and now go to a general election? Are we going to focus on the legacy by the president, the Big Four agenda? Is going really to be a game changer in this country, and we can only wait and see what the president will be advised to do, because I'm sure very soon he will issue, or the Attorney General will issue a communique on the same. But my feel and take is that the parliament has failed, and that is very deliberate. It had all those years. Look at the parliament that we had in 2013, even when President Kibaki was still in power.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't do anything. The past term of President Uhuru, the parliament did not do anything as far as the gender rule is concerned. The second bit, they have not done anything. So what can we expect from them? It's still going to be the same thing over and over again.
All right. If we are to go for a referendum, if there could be a change of the constitution, if we are to talk about the BBI today, Kamau Getwechi, what would you wish incorporated on the BBI in regards to addressing this balance of course, getting this balance of gender, within the appointive and, elective positions?
For me, what I would like to see captured in the BBI, it's for them to try and tame the theft that we see in this country. We've seen rampant ripping off our economy by politicians, and that notwithstanding, the ballooning civil service. These are some of the things that any Kenyan would like to see addressed. The aspect of them, again, trying to bring in additional political seats, to me, should be something that takes a back burner. And again, I would like to see them address an issue such as this in the BBI, one that will ensure we are not even increasing the number of seats in our parliament, but by extension, we are ensuring that the 2/3 gender rule will be respected as is provided today. So we need to see a lot of creativity in what we do, and not necessarily increasing the number of seats. But having said that, one of the biggest wins I would wish to take home from the BBI and make sure that it is institutionalized is the mechanisms that will ensure at the end of any general election we do not see Kenyans waste or lose some 6-8 months before the warring factions or the different groupings as it is actually get to agree. So we would like them to just address the things that today really affect the mwananchi, as opposed to creating even bigger problems for us going forward.
All right. And the Constitution does not contemplate any other situation when a general election can be held. Consequently, a dissolution of Parliament will lead to a constitutional crisis, according to many, as there does not exist a mechanism for conducting a general election other than what is contemplated in Article 111. we have been treated to this by the CJ, and of course in this many have tried to read into what would be the ultimate solution to the scenario that stays here. And also as we continue to read into that, we also get to understand that there are loopholes that are clearly being manifested on the constitution. So coming to you, Collins, these constitutional loopholes that we are having, that we witnessed today, just how best can we chart the way forward in sealing them, even if the president is not going to take that advice?
I think this is a point we need to have a conversation and try and relook at the 2010 Constitution. I mean, if you look at it, there has been different interpretations of the same, that there are bits of the Constitution that could contradict the other. There are areas that probably are not clear in law. For instance, what happens when the parliament is dissolved? Do we go on general election, or I heard other people talking of a by-election. So there is that interpretation that has been taken by different people differently. So we need to have a conversation. And instead of talking about adding more positions of the prime minister, of adding more positions of deputy prime ministers and all that, we now need to revisit the constitution and see where these loopholes are and try to fill them even as we move forward to having a referendum, so that we are able to have a constitution that is implementable. Because what we have right now is a constitution that is very hard for certain people to interpret, because everybody has their own interpretation. So which interpretation should be taken? So we need to have a clear constitution that even a layman like me, who is not a lawyer, is able to read and understand it without having to seek legal advice on certain aspects. So that is a conversation that needs to happen, so that we fill those particular loopholes by having clear timelines that are given, that when parliament is dissolved, then after this and this time, that another election should be held. Because as at now, we are in a limbo. We don't know what should happen. We don't know, what the president should do, or we just wait to be advised on the same, just like any other person would.
And when we speak about us being in a limbo, then you can imagine what it is that the president is in. And we are talking about the upholding of rule of law. We are talking about respecting the constitution and the spirit of constitutionalism. And we are talking about a scenario that the president should start by, of course, abiding by this as the key person of the land. Still picking on the reactions of key lawyers and leaders in the country, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka argues this way, but the spirit of the constitution at the moment does not anticipate dissolution of parliament. The law, therefore, can't afford to be static. A constitutional amendment is necessary to avoid a crisis. NAK leader, that is NAK Kenya leader, Martha Karua, argues that this is a timely and long overdue decision. The law doesn't leave room for the president not to act. Otherwise, he should be on the good side of the law and dissolve parliament. It's a catch-22. Kamau Gatwichi. However much we might want to argue about this, just how best can this be approached so that, again, we do not go against the very same laws of the land that we set?
Yeah, you can say that, and the president would argue differently and say, yes, why should I just put the entire country into a very awkward situation whereby I'm pushing them into an election and then have another election in less than 18 months. I mean, even if you were to set out elections today, I'm sure IEBC would request for some 60, 90 or so days. That would push this particular election to early next year. And what does that start with? Another 18 or so months before we can have yet another general election. So, I mean, even without a good understanding of the very good document that we have as our constitution today, you can almost be certain that we are not going to have an election anytime soon. What I know the president is going to do is that he's going to put in place a team that is going to midwife this situation, a team that is going to advise the nation as to how to move to the situation whereby the two-third gender rule is actually respected. But as to whether or not we're going to have an election, even with my little seat here in the Chaka around the Nyeri, I doubt we're going to have an election anytime soon. What we can take from many others is that this election will happen at the designated time. What the president will do is just to put in a mechanism that will almost certainly ensure the two-third gender rule is respected, if at all they don't kick it out with their BBI formula.
All right, of course, as we get to wind up on this one, Collins, in reaction to what Kamau Gatwechi had said earlier on, that a referendum would be as simple as a yes or a no, but the repercussions of us going for a by-election or an election after Parliament has been dissolved would be a numerous effect in comparison to the latter, or the above. What would you make of that statement? I mean, if we're talking about not going for an election, why is it that the referendum seems like it would be an easy election to go to?
I think there is no easy election. Both the referendum and the general election is as expensive as it should be, and it's really going to strain the common mwananchi. We are going to pay our taxes. Look at the proposal that has been given. We are going to spend billions of money in the event that we have a referendum. So we ask ourselves now, which is the priority right now? Is it a referendum, or do we go on a general election in the event that the parliament is dissolved? There is that is now where the president finds himself in a dilemma, because he doesn't know whether to shove the BBI initiative and go the CJ way, or first do the referendum and all that. And you will be very surprised that we cannot have two elections at the same. We cannot have a referendum, then after a little time we have a general election. It's going to be tough for this particular country, and I think that is now the excuse that the president could also use, that having two elections at the same, in a short span is going to be very expensive for this country. So what I think should happen, if you were to ask me, is that we need to have a conversation that now brings some of these changes, so that as we go to the referendum, we have a clear line that will be able to fill certain aspects of the constitution that are not clear to us, so that we can have one election other than having two elections that will cost this country dearly. So that is what needs to happen, if you were to ask me.
All right. Well, our political analyst, Collins Bore, and social commentator, Kamau Gatwechi, thank you so much for the great insights. We can only wait to see whether the president will bite the bait or not. And, of course, what way forward in regards to ensuring that the two-third gender rule is addressed. And that's where we get to wind up this particular session. Thank you so much for the great feedback that you've given unto us, and also the great insights from the two gentlemen. And as we cross over to a different segment altogether, first I'll leave you with the breakfast tips of the week. It is important that we also take good care of ourselves. As they would say, breakfast is the best meal of the day, so you ensure that you take it as a king. So we want to give you those tips that are going to help you to make it simple, but then again, healthy for you. So breakfast tips coming your way.
Don't use. This is the yellow sweet potatoes. So this is what we had for dinner in the form of chips. So whatever was left is what I've cut into pieces. As it is right now, we are trying to learn how to reuse our dishes, no wasting of food. So I've used my sweet potatoes. I have my red hoho and yellow hoho, green hoho, and onions and some dania, 4 eggs, and some salt to taste. I also have some oil, which I'm going to use. So this is a very simple dish. It's my version of Spanish omelette, because Spanish omelette, you use the Irish potatoes, but I'm going to use the sweet potatoes, which is something different from the normal omelette. So I'm going to start by putting on my stove. You can see I'm carrying something which looks like a lid. It is called a splatter screen, to make sure when you're frying your eggs, the oil doesn't go everywhere. And also this splatter screen is very important for this dish, because it will help you turn your your omelette without a lot of issues. So we are going to start with the oil. So I'm going to start with my onions because I want them to cook a bit longer. Don't put too much. You can save your onions and still use it for another dish. It doesn't mean when you cut things in your kitchen you have to use all of it, even when you don't need it. Then I'm going to use my red hoho, yellow I mean. I seem to like red. Okay, this is yellow. Then we'll have green. Mornings are for color. So always have as much color as you can in the morning. Going to have the red hoho. And the potatoes. So I'm just going to cover this. Maybe I can add a bit of dhania, not too much, because we already have green. We don't want to have too much green. So I'm just going to cover this and let it cook. In the meantime, I'll be sorting out my eggs. So I always advise that you break one egg at a time. So in case the egg is bad, one egg is bad, you don't waste all your eggs. Eggs can be messy, so you need to have a kitchen towel near you. In case some of it goes to your hand, you just wipe it off. So I'm going to have some salt here. Not too much. Can clear as you go along. You can see how many colors I have here. So some of you might wonder why I used the orange sweet potato for the chips. It's because it doesn't have too much fiber and its cooking time is very short, 7 to 10 minutes. So it's a good alternative to our Irish potatoes. So I thought it was something we can start embracing as Kenyans. So we can add just a bit of more oil. As you see, my eggs will need an extra oil, so I'll add a bit more. So at this point, just add in your eggs. Try and spread it as much as possible. Then you cover it and let it cook. And a very low heat, very low heat. So let it cook. So after a while, keep checking your eggs. You see it's setting, what you call setting, it's becoming more and more solid. And maybe you can just move the side a little to make the liquid part of it go down and also cook. Because as I told you, we are going to use that splatter screen to try and turn our omelette. See, now it has set, most of it is down. So we are going to cover it again and just let it cook a bit on top before we turn it. See, I've moved it from the edges. Ready to turn it now, but I'll cover it a bit more. So I'll cover it and let it set some more. Give it 2 more minutes, then you turn it. Okay, so I think we are now ready to turn our egg. So what you need to do is hold your splatter screen like that and just turn your egg like that. Then you're supposed to push it back. And as I told you, it can get messy. But you push it back nicely. If you don't have a splatter screen, you can still use a plate. You're going to cover. You can just use a plate. It works the same. So you're just going to cover and cook it briefly. So now our egg is ready. And as I told you, if you don't have the splatter screen, you can use a plate, a flat plate like this one, a round one. So what we're going to do is just remove our egg. Well, now it's ready. I don't want to use the splatter one because it was dirty now. You can see the beautiful colors we have here of our omelette. So what we are going to do, because you need to serve it neatly, is to cut it maybe. Into 4 neat pieces. So what we are going to do, we are going to put it in a clean, nice plate. So we'll have something like this. Just put it there. Here. Assuming kuna mwingine hayuko kwa meza, so you can keep one aside. But that's how I do my Spanish omelette, using sweet potatoes instead of Irish potatoes. I would like you to try this recipe and just tell me how it is compared to the other one. It's a very easy recipe. You don't have to have all those ingredients I've put. You don't have to have all the colors of peppers. You can have green or red, whichever, but as I told you, mornings are for color, so try and make it as colorful as possible.